An obscure footnote in an unclassified government file leads me to uncover a secret group of scientists. Their mission? Protect the president against assassination.
They tried to research every possible conceivable way that they can assassinate the president.
Even if the shrapnel doesn't hit the plane, the shockwave can potentially tear apart sections of the plane.
You could basically upload a photo of someone and go find them and kill them.
The U.S. government has contractors that are making full-scale versions of these for this very purpose.
09 Purple, you have splash. Stand by for PDA.
Every year, more than $90 billion is allocated to clandestine government programs, collectively called the Black Budget. Each individual operation is a black file.
I'm Mike Baker. As a covert CIA operations officer for over a decade and a half,
I supervised missions around the globe. My security clearances gave me access to many classified projects. Now, I'm following the money trail to the secrets hidden inside the Black Files. Manila, Philippines, November 2017. During an official visit with Philippine President Duarte, the Secret Service receives word of a credible threat against the US president's life. How did they validate the threat and prevent it? The answers lie in a top-secret government program.
the Strategic Threat Analysis and Research Project, or Project STAR, is a billion-dollar black file with one purpose: protect the star of the United States, the president. For decades, it was just a mention in a footnote of an obscure government memo. Until recently, when a threat to the president appeared on social media.
Agents in the Secret Service's Protective Intelligence Division intercept a tweet that reads, "Gonna be in Manila the same time. I'll take one for the team, lads." Accompanying the tweet is a photo of Kennedy presidential assassin Lee Harvey Oswald. Agents track the IP for the tweet, the unique identifier for the computer. It's coming from a location in downtown Manila. Using facial recognition software, they're able to match the face, track the operative's movements, and locate him heading towards the president's hotel. They swarm in for the arrest. A crisis is averted.
How did we develop the ability to stop an assassination attempt before it even gets started? I'm meeting with investigative journalist John Greenwald. He's devoted much of his career to uncovering U.S. government secrets, including many black files. John.
Hey, Mike.
This one, Project STAR. Tell me what you know.
Sure. It came to light just in the last few years, thanks to journalist Sharon Weinberger, who was working on a book. She uncovered these formerly secret files from the National Archives that detailed this top secret project aimed at protecting the president. What she discovered about Project STAR was right after the JFK assassination. They tried to research every possible conceivable way that they could, in essence, assassinate the president to ensure that the Kennedy assassination were to never happen again.
The motorcade moves in
November 1963. President John F. Kennedy is assassinated while riding in an open-car motorcade in downtown Dallas. His death lays bare the failures of presidential protection. 3 lead scientists from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, determine more needs to be done, and it needs to be done in secret. The Black Budget program and the technology that would result from it is called Project STAR.
I, Lyndon Baines Johnson, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute
the office of the Presidency of the United States.
What was interesting was that it was kept from the president himself. They feared that he did not want to hurt his macho image.
Were any of the concepts used at that time, are they still in effect today?
They were creating weapons in their own minds and putting it to paper to think that if we can think of this, so can the bad guys. So they were thinking of a billy club with a sharp protruding edge that if you would get close enough to the president, you could literally just pick it up and this thing would shoot into the human body. They were looking at aerosol spraying guns, or like a squirt gun with some type of chemical agent.
But I want to thank you for your time.
Anytime.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Is it possible that some of the seemingly crazy ideas from Project Star scientists are actually in use today? I'm going to connect with interdisciplinary scientist and investigator Ben McGee. He's been studying some of the early technology, and he tells me that some of the strangest ideas developed for Project Star are actually based on sound science. Ben.
Hey, Mike.
Sweet fish tank.
This is not a fish tank you see before you. This is an example of the physics of one of the more innovative methods for protecting the president from an assassination.
Was this coming out of Project Star?
Yes.
Okay, what do we got? Tell me about it.
Yeah, let me walk you through it.
Yep.
So forget about the tank for just a second, and let's talk about mirages. Okay. You make the ground much hotter than the air over it, and when you do that, the atmosphere will act like a lens and bend an image of the sky downward onto it, so it makes it look like the road is wet. It's actually an image of the sky being sort of bent down.
Right.
Well, you could do the opposite. So if you make the air immediately over the ground much hotter, you do the reverse,
Just reverse
so the ground is colder, it will bend the image in the reverse direction. This happens in nature, rarely, but occasionally, where it makes mountains look like floating islands in the sky, or it makes ships look like they're sailing above the horizon.
Okay.
I mean, you may have seen pictures of this.
Yeah.
Imagine the president standing at a podium. You have these heat generators in front that would superheat the air mass in front of him. Mm-hmm. Then you've got the crowd, the audience over here. It would take the president standing here and bend the image so it would look like he's actually standing here.
Lift him up.
Exactly.
Okay, so a would-be assassin looking at the target.
Yes, this would fire at the president's head or the president's chest. And in the real world, the bullet would go straight over the president's head.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Since it's not practical to try and do this with heat right here, imagine that this tank represents two air masses. The empty part of the tank is your superheated air, and then the water is, the very cold air. Not necessarily in the right direction, but watch what happens to the image of my hand as I cross the plane.
All right, yeah, no, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So and the water is denser than air, so this is like a magnified example. But this principle is real. They call it refraction.
Great idea. I mean,
Yeah.
very clever. Was it practical? Did they actually implement it?
It is based on absolutely sound science, but the amount of energy required to heat all that air, there was no way to actually implement something on this magnitude.
What else you got?
Well, there was another, here, can you move this table up here, please? Allow me to present another anti-assassination technique.
Oh, the fan, of course.
Yes.
Yes.
You've heard about fans saving presidents?
No.
Yeah.
No, but I'm going to.
Yes.
Okay.
No, so, this was representing giant spinning rods. And the idea was, well, if the president's standing at a podium right here, if you have deflecting rods that are spinning fast enough and are strong enough they would literally knock a bullet out of the way, then you're protected from the crowd. And you might say, well, if you put this big thing in front of the president,
right.
How's this gonna work? This is all based on the physics of the human eye. So, just to walk through it. So sure enough, what were solid blades, you can see straight through.
And so I'm the president. I'm being presumptuous, but I'm the president. I got my podium. I got the crowd back there.
Yep.
You've got rods,
Yep.
right, spinning to deflect any projectile.
Yep.
People can see me.
You got it.
What's the problem?
Well, this is a tiny motor, and when I ramp this thing up, now imagine you're the president trying to give a speech on something, and this is the smallest scale.
And not to mention the fact that the first 20 to 50 rows of people in the audience getting hit by this massive wind turbine. But like with the refraction, again, a great example of thinking of what could be done and using pure science to create an opportunity.
You got it.
The scientific minds behind these inventions were incredibly creative, if not entirely practical. It makes me wonder what the current iteration of Project Star is cooking up now, and just what science fiction-like threats they're working to thwart. A footnote to a secret government document reveals a black file called Project Star, created by a group of scientists dedicated to protecting the president. Their mission: determine all the ways a president could be assassinated, and then stop them before they ever happen.
What I want to know is, what are today's threats and how can they be stopped? So I'm meeting up with a man that gets asked that very question by top government officials. When we're talking about the protection of a high-value target, and there's none more high-profile than the president, where do you think this is going?
I think the great challenge for people protecting the president, other high-value targets like that, is that there's a lower barrier to entry for the kind of technology that the bad guys might have at hand. If you're thinking about what's changed since Project Star, back then, they literally don't have the internet. Now, the internet would be crucial to everything from the potential inspiration of an assassin to maybe a group using it for intelligence gathering or coordination to literally the internet could be the means for the attack itself, if cyber means causing physical change in the world.
So how are the new technologies making their way into the potential assassin's playbook?
So from the past, they needed to get up close, be it with a knife, be it with a pistol. Now, a potential assassin or a group has access to technology that allows them to operate at a distance that might not be measured in miles, it may be from a continent away. So you could envision anything from a drone attack from a distance, unmanned systems that will allow them to operate remotely.
Drone attacks are on the mind of the Secret Service ever since one flew onto the grounds of the White House in 2015. It was harmless, but the breach in security it exposed was not.
So a drone would be a good example of what technology is now available.
Back in the past, you would have said, okay, the Air Force, controls the airspace over Washington, D.C. Now you have to think about someone with a commercial drone that they could pick up, linking that together with low-level explosives or something to create real threat.
P.W. Singer's warning about drones got me thinking, just how deadly can they be? A little research came up with a new high-tech killing machine, an autonomous drone.
This is what could happen.
Your kids probably have one of these, right? Not quite. Hell of a pilot? No. That skill is all AI. Just like any mobile device these days, it has cameras and sensors, and just like your phones and social media apps, it does facial recognition. Inside here is 3 grams of shaped explosive. This is how it works. Did you see that? That little bang is enough to penetrate the skull and destroy the contents. These are available today. We have a distribution network taking orders from military, law enforcement, and specialist clients.
The scenario is terrifying, but not yet a reality. So why would anyone put together a film laying out all the dangers that P.W. Singer warned us about? Well, a few telephone calls led me to Professor Stuart Russell. Professor Russell and others are experts at UC Berkeley and Stanford in robotics and artificial intelligence and the threats that they could pose to society. Hi, Professor Russell.
Hi, Mike. It's nice to see you.
What compelled you to make this film?
So the reason we made the film is because we wanted people to understand in a very concrete way the threat that we're talking about. So the threat comes from autonomous weapons that can locate and select and attack human targets without human supervision.
What is the technology that makes this possible?
So the technology that we show in the movie is not dissimilar from what you can buy in a toy store or from one of the big drone companies, plus the capability for it to operate autonomously using artificial intelligence. The ability to recognize human beings by the targeting criteria that you gave it, and then some of the maneuvering capability to actually carry out the attack. All of these pieces are already available in one form or another. If countries decided to, I think within 18 months to 2 years, you could be seeing the deployment of millions of these weapons.
Do you believe that a single drone carrying out an assassination is possible?
Face recognition of individuals is basically an off-the-shelf technology and used in several countries on a mass scale. So yes, you could basically upload a photo of someone and say, I expect them to be in this general area, go find them and kill them. None of that is technologically difficult right now. From talking to people in the US government, I know that the Secret Service is very, very concerned about this kind of attack.
The threat is very real. In March 2019, a drone exploded during a speech of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. The attack was unsuccessful, but the drone was using AI.
Okay, well, clearly, this threat goes beyond the president and other high-profile targets, right? It's an international problem. So do we need an international solution?
To prevent this kind of, I would say, disastrous future, the only real possibility is that we have an international agreement. Because at the moment, everyone is afraid that the other countries are going to do it, so that means they have to do it. But if we agree that this direction is a bad direction for the world, then we can put a stop to it.
Well, thank you very much, Professor. Very important points to consider.
Thanks, Mike. It was nice talking to you. Bye.
So how would the elite team that's tasked with keeping the president safe handle a micro-drone attack? I'm meeting up with my favorite scientist and investigator, Ben McGee. He says he's got an idea. Ben.
Mike.
Listen, I've given you a big, scary problem this time, right? Slaughter bots. The potential for havoc is frightening. Is there something we can do to stop them?
So take this, for example, a commercial drone. You can pick this up on the cheap, but the problem is, red badge, this is now not a commercial drone. You put a few grams of shape charge in there and it is a slaughter bot. There are two ways that this thing can find you. One is a camera, and here, check this out. That's actually a real-time view right there. See
Okay,
it?
yeah,
See yourself?
yeah, looking at me.
So facial recognition. That's one way that this thing could literally find you in a crowd and then seek you out and go get you. The other way is for it to be piloted, either on board or via a controller. If you imagine, that's the problem. And then see this thing, now it's targeting you.
Okay, so in our scenario, say I'm the president.
Yeah.
If I'm the target now of this drone, we've got two things to worry about. Camera system, control system.
You got it.
All right, now that it's up in the air and it's targeting me,
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you if we have a way to stop it.
Fortunately, we do. So imagine you're the president, the drone's coming in during a speech, the Secret Service might go for something like this, which is, they technically call it electromagnetic countermeasures. I like to call it a photon rifle. It fires light. So there are two kinds of transmitters this thing has. One is basically a green laser. They call it a dazzler, but you think of it as a super laser pointer.
And the purpose of that?
That will be to cook the camera so that it can't see you, and facial recognition like we all have on our phones. You disable it.
Okay.
Now, if that doesn't work, this is essentially a big radio transmitter. It operates on 2.4 gigahertz, which is Wi-Fi. It's basically radio. If you imagine the controller is talking to the drone, imagine it's literally shouting out commands. What this thing is a bullhorn. It makes it impossible for that drone to hear the directions.
Okay, so you blind the camera, and essentially what you're going to do here is jam the signal.
You got it.
Okay.
So let's try the first thing.
All right.
Now watch. As you fire the dazzler. Now look at the camera. You're actually seeing the drone get blinded.
It out.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Look at it. Drone's still coming.
Right. You've got the control system now to worry about.
Yep, exactly. So turn
It's
on.
getting closer, man.
Here's the safety. Well, you always need a safety and a weapon,
Right.
right? Okay, so this is on. Remember, radio is invisible and it doesn't make any sound, so you won't know when this thing is on unless I pull the trigger. So watch this. Yeah.
Nice shot. Good. And I want to thank you for doing that.
Well, you're welcome.
But how accurate do you have to be with this?
Not that accurate. This is a directional antenna, but it's got a bit of a spread, so think of it more like a shotgun.
Okay, and distance. Obviously, the further away you can disable this because you don't know what's on the drone that's coming towards the intended target.
Right.
So what are we talking about, 100 yards, 200 yards?
Well, this is a prototype that I made for this demonstration, and I did disable the right bits and parts. If I actually fired this full intensity, it'd be a violation of FCC law, and that's breaking the law. So,
how difficult is this to make?
It's fairly difficult. It's not rocket science, but it's highly technical.
Okay, and these are not just in the development stage. This is something that we have
Yes.
available now.
So more than this, you know, the U.S. government has contractors that are making full-scale versions of these for government use for this very purpose.
Okay, but when we're talking about, again, protecting the president or really any high-profile individual, we do have a way now at this point to stop these things.
You got it. Secret Service of the future, when they're trying to take down a slaughter bot, they'd reach for something like that.
Excellent.
Is the Secret Service going to be armed with photon guns to protect the president? This is certainly the sort of thing the original Project Star scientists had in mind, but just how real is it? For that, I'm going to need to dig deep into the top secret programs already in place at the White House. The White House, surrounded by Secret Service agents carrying photon guns, downing killer drones? How far off from this future are we? I'm about to talk with presidential expert Ron Kessler about the latest defenses around and in the White House.
Ron.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. What are the current threats and how can we plan for them?
Today it's biological, radiological elements, drone attacks. It's really endless now.
The physical construction of the White House, Ron, how secure is it?
The main aim is to prevent anybody from getting in. The airspace above the White House is not supposed to be intruded on by any commercial airliner. The nearby National Airport tracks with radar any possible intrusion. In addition to that, there are missile sites across the street on the roof.
So the White House has its own air defense system?
Exactly. In addition, fighter planes can be deployed and have been deployed in the event of a possible threat.
Those are big threats, but what can be done to protect against something as simple as a drone? The White House employs green and red laser warning tracking systems that alert oncoming targets. There are reports also that describe a dazzler laser and jammer, much like Ben McGee's, meant to disorient any threat by blinding the driver or pilot. The jammers also employ GPS, which can track drones back to their origin. But if a drone carrying an explosive or biological weapon can somehow make it past these measures, how is the president protected inside the White House itself?
The president himself has various secret alarms. They're ornaments that are presidential seals. If the president turns one of them over, that sounds an alarm to the Secret Service. Recently, a bunker was built under the North Lawn. It's about 6 stories deep, and it was all done secretly. What it does is it houses the whole White House staff almost indefinitely, I think for months, with its own air supply, with its own water supply. They've put in pressure devices that increase the pressure of the air in the White House so that if a biological element is released, it'll push out and not harm anybody in the White House. They also have radiation detectors as well as, of course, detection of metal objects.
Secret Service with photon rifles is not such a crazy idea after all. In fact, it sounds like it's a reality. But how is the president protected when he leaves the White House? How formidable is the presidential limo, also known as the Beast? To find out, I'm flying to San Antonio, Texas to get a look at how vehicles are armored. This is Trent Kimball, CEO of the Texas Armoring Corporation.
Is this a Range Rover, top-of-the-line Range Rover?
For 2 generations, his family business has armored vehicles to withstand almost anything.
What is the science behind armoring a vehicle?
We're going to take apart a vehicle and then put all those armor materials inside the vehicle and then rebuild your vehicle around those armor materials.
I mean, I don't think people understand when you say you're stripping it down.
Yeah.
You're really stripping it down.
We cut it open. You can see actually the stitching that they already welded back on, and our material goes inside that, and then we put this back on. So we've actually reinforced this with ballistic steel.
Yeah. What are the components of armoring?
So the components of armoring are the glass and opaque armor. Opaque armor usually consists of either ballistic steel or Kevlar or Spectra shield.
The opaque armor in the presidential vehicle, also known as bomb blankets, is made up of layers of ballistic nylon, titanium, and ceramic with space built in between. This allows it to absorb the energy of an explosive blast. It's designed to withstand a C4 attack. But what about the windows?
Talk to me about the science of how that armor glass stops around.
So you have several layers of glass and then a polycarbonate inside layer that's going to act like a catcher's mitt for all the energy coming at it. A round hits the glass, that energy is diffused throughout the glass, and then that polycarbonate is going to catch everything else that's coming inside.
Okay, so it's not like the movies where you see the bullets bouncing off the glass. The layers of glass, and you have the thickness based on what round you're looking to protect against.
Come over here, and we got this glass. It's a windshield. It's about 2 inches thick.
And so right here, this final bit is the polycarbonate that you're talking about.
Yes, and you'll see what it does after we shoot it. You'll see bullets enter, and then you'll see all the glass break, and then on the inside, when we come back, we'll be able to touch this glass, and there won't be any penetration. All right, let's do it.
All right. I'm firing an AK-47 assault rifle, one of the most frequently used weapons in terrorist attacks.
Okay, going hot. 3, 2, 1.
Tracking down how the black budget funds technology to protect the president has brought me to San Antonio, Texas, where we're pitting an AK-47 against a bulletproof glass windshield, one of the most vulnerable parts of an armored vehicle.
Three, 2, 1. Weapon is clear. Wow, look at that.
Yep.
Just what you talked about. So it diffuses the energy, spreads out.
That's right.
And you end up, and this is 2-inch, right?
That's correct. It's 2 inches thick. They shot with the AK-47.
Don, look at that. That's fantastic.
Yep. No penetration.
Nice. Just imagine what the beast is like, right? With 6-inch glass.
That's right. It's going to be able to stop a lot more.
In addition to the 6-inch bulletproof glass, the presidential limo also has a transparent layer of metal inside the glass, making it capable of withstanding a significant explosion. The transparent layer is created by mixing powdered forms of aluminum, oxygen, and nitrogen. A heat and pressure process shape the mixture into a clear shield. But even without the clear metal layer, Trent backs his company's product by putting his life on the line, literally.
And I understand you've got a rather unusual way of demonstrating how confident you are in your materials.
That's correct.
When it comes to assuring our client's safety, we take product testing extremely seriously.
Somebody said, hey, why don't you sit behind there? And I said, yeah, I've seen the tests and demonstrations that we do. The bullet will be stopped.
Life is valuable. Protect it.
Reinforcing a car, regardless of the materials, packs on weight. The presidential limo weighs in at 20,000 pounds. Now, imagine a plane that weighs more than 500,000 pounds and flies at 30,000 feet at 500 miles per hour. How do the top scientists and engineers armor and protect Air Force One? I'm headed to Washington, D.C. to meet with an expert on the president's home in the air.
Talk to me about Air Force One.
Whenever my family asks where I'm going, if I'm going to be on Air Force One, they're happy because it's the most secure plane in the world. We know that there's a skin, a special skin on the plane that's designed to ward off electromagnetic pulses. There's also countermeasures in case the plane was attacked with shoulder-mounted missiles or Stinger missiles and so on.
The electromagnetic shielding prevents the electronics on board from failing and helps scramble or jam incoming missiles. But then Ken mentions another threat I'd not considered: potential vulnerabilities in its secure communications.
Whenever there's an incident, 9/11 is a good example, the security gets more intense. That day, the Secret Service learned a lot about what Air Force One was capable of and not capable of. One of the things that troubled President Bush that day is that he was losing communications with the ground. He was trying to communicate with people, and his contacts were dropping.
I'd imagine another crisis like a 9/11, the president's going to communicate from aboard Air Force One, but how do you prevent that communication from being hijacked? How can you guarantee in terms of voice authentication?
Presidential impersonations are a rising concern after the increase of deep fakes, videos altered to make public figures appear to say things that they didn't.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time. This is a dangerous time.
We hear that there are more communications systems that have been added to the plane that the Secret Service, understandably, and the Air Force don't want to talk about.
What we do know is that modern-day DARPA scientists are actively working with digital experts through a program called Metaphor, or Media Forensics, to automatically detect image manipulation. It seems likely the president is protected by a top-secret facet of this program. We also know there are 2 new 747s currently being customized by Boeing as the new Air Force One. What futuristic technology are today's Project Star scientists planning to utilize to make the next generation of presidential aircraft even more impregnable?
Boeing Corporation is currently customizing 2 747 jetliners for the next generation of Air Force One. Currently outfitted with missile scrambling technology and artificial intelligence protections, how much further can Black Files scientists go to protect the president? I'm about to meet with a top journalist in the world of clandestine projects. Logan Nye says that he's uncovered a curious patent filing by Boeing Corporation that could shed some light on the next level of presidential protection. Logan.
Yeah, Mike, good to see you.
So they're obviously concerned not just with land-based threats, but keeping him safe up in the air.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, Air Force One is a very advanced aircraft with really great defensive measures. But you can't protect against everything all the time. When you can, you take a new technological step to protect the president. One of the interesting things that Boeing is looking at is whether or not we can create sudden force fields to protect against shock waves. So if I send a missile up against you, anti-aircraft missiles usually work by sending out a cloud of shrapnel and a shock wave that can knock the plane off course. Now, Air Force One has defenses against the tracking mechanisms for missiles, so it can emit chaff to get a radar-seeking missile off course. It can emit flares to knock a thermal missile off course. But if it gets there and sets off its explosion, even if the shrapnel doesn't hit the plane, the shock wave can potentially tear apart sections of the plane or force it into some sort of uncontrolled movement that could cause it to spin, could cause it flight troubles. Boeing is looking at a system that would stop those shock waves. Boeing has filed a patent for a system that would allow a transmission of energy through the air, so basically an electrical arc. Boeing thinks they can find a way to control them so that these electrical arcs are timed to cancel out an incoming shock wave. So if a missile's coming towards the president and it goes off, that shrapnel cloud's still going. The plane is still going to take some shrapnel damage. But that shock wave that can push that aluminum in, that can collapse the tube, that can start breaking apart structurally the airplane, that shock wave can be canceled out by a properly timed, perfectly placed electrical arc. There's still plenty of guys who are looking far ahead. So you have groups like DARPA. Their whole job is to make sure that the enemy doesn't surprise us with sudden changes in technology, but we're able to surprise them.
Of course, I'd like to get into Boeing to ask them about their patent, but nobody's willing to go on camera to discuss the defensive shields. It's not hard to imagine that if they can successfully produce the shields, they'll be deployed not only on Air Force One, but also as a part of presidential limousines and helicopters.
I'm heading back to Washington, D.C. to speak with a leader in directed energy weapons concepts similar to those proposed by Boeing. Booz Allen. Sir, if we could start from maybe the 30,000-foot level. Directed energy weapons. What are we talking about?
So in the near term, there are two types of directed energy weapons: high energy lasers and high-powered microwave devices. A lot of your viewers have seen the laser pointer, and you compare that with a flashlight. And the big difference there is the light coming out of a laser pointer is what we call coherent. The wavelengths of the light are all in the same direction and the same frequency. Almost everybody has a microwave oven in their kitchen. Well, a high-powered microwave is basically taking those microwaves and focusing them in a more coherent fashion. And just like if you put a piece of metal in your microwave oven and you see what happens, the same thing happens when microwaves are directed toward a target.
Why is this important?
They operate at the speed of light. These weapons can have very large magazines, so that you can be firing on one power source and charging the other. They're very stealthy, so most of these lasers are invisible and they don't make any noise. And last but not least, they can be dialed from non-lethal to lethal.
So where are we in the development of directed energy weapons?
So several services have already been experimenting with prototypes of these weapons. There's a lab in the Navy in which they will demonstrate that they can take a 2-kilowatt laser and they can burn a 1-inch hole in a 1/4-inch thick steel plate in less than 2 seconds. The Air Force has a program in which they're looking at putting lasers on their aircraft to shoot down missiles that are fired at them. We're investing in ramping up those power levels and also reducing the size, weight, and volume needed for those weapons so that they can be placed on not only ships, but on small vehicles as well as aircraft and maybe even spacecraft.
Defensive electrical arcs and laser weapons are ushering in futuristic protections the original Project Star envisioned. Photon laser guns will take out killer artificial intelligence bots, and computer algorithms will defend against deep fakes.
Age of information.
But there's one form of political assassination, one that has been used for thousands of years, that is simple and almost impossible to defend against. The president's car is armored, his plane's protected. Even the sky above the White House is monitored and protected against science fiction-like threats. But the mandate of Project Star is to think of everything. And looking over the past decade, there's been one country adept at political assassinations that are as deadly as they are simple.
In 2006, Alexander Litvinenko, a former agent for the Russian intel service, visited the Millennium Hotel in London, England. There, he participated in a popular daily British ritual. He drank a cup of tea. 21 days later, he died of poisoning from polonium-210, a radioactive isotope. It's these kinds of insidious threats that keep scientists at DARPA up at night.
Black File scientists need to know, just how easy is it to poison the president?
Ben.
Mike.
All right, when we're talking about protecting the president, you have to plan for everything.
Yep.
Every possible means of attack, including poison. Now, poison tends to be used by nation states. Go back to 1978, Georgy Markov near Waterloo Bridge in London. They got him with ricin. Chechen rebel leader, they got him with sarin. But probably no case more famous than the 2006 killing of a former FSB officer who was very critical of the Russian leadership, Alexander Litvinenko. They got him with a cup of tea.
Yep. So what makes this so insidious is that assassination attempt was using polonium-210. It's what they call an alpha emitter. One thing I want to stress is that not all radiation is the same.
Meaning what?
Meaning there are different types of radiation, and the type of radiation emitted by polonium-210 and plutonium and many other things we worried about is called alpha radiation. Alpha radiation is very weakly penetrating, and it's short range. You know, a little particle of alpha radiation is only going to go this far before it's stopped by the air. It won't penetrate a sheet of paper, and it won't penetrate the dead layer of skin on the outside of your body. So what I have here is a commercial radioactive source of polonium-210. It's low quantity, it's unregulated, but you don't have to take my word for anything that I just said. Why don't you let me show you? This is a Geiger counter.
Okay.
You know, a very simple radiation detector. And what happens is as a particle of radiation travels through the probe, it makes it beep.
Okay, so it's beeping now.
Yeah, there's background radiation around us all the time. So watch. Still just a beep every once in a while.
Okay.
There it is.
All right, so
and I'm right on it.
Yeah, you're almost touching it.
I can stand next to this thing for the rest of my life and it won't pose me a hazard. I can hold it in my hand for the rest of my life and it won't pose me a hazard. But there's no dead layer of skin on the inside of your body. So if you get this inside you, it's literally wailing away. It was just like a shotgun. It's just going blam, 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 just destroying molecules and breaking apart DNA and literally doing a lot of damage.
So what was found in the investigation in 2006 again was that Litvinenko had T. He became ill almost immediately and spent 3 excruciating weeks in the hospital before dying a horrible death.
So let me show you why mixing something like this into tea is just so terrifying. So I'm not actually going to douse this source in tea. You know, I don't want to damage it with the fluid. But in place of the tea, I'm going to use a sheet of paper. Remember I mentioned that alpha radiation won't penetrate a sheet of paper? Well, tea is a much better shield than this piece of paper.
Really, water is denser than, say, this sheet of paper.
Yep. Even if I suspected this sort of assassination technique, and even if I had my own Geiger counter that I carried with me at all times.
Naturally.
Yeah. And even if I surveyed my tea, I would see nothing because the tea itself was in the way, just like the sheet of paper, and it'd be even worse.
So Litvinenko, even if he'd had one of these, and he had a cup of tea poured for him, he could have held it over there and there would have been nothing.
You got it.
Because the density of the water is preventing that.
Yeah, the water is much more dense than air.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so it's a real problem.
Fascinating, Ben. Protecting the president is one of the most challenging jobs in the world. Aided by Black File projects, U.S. presidents have largely been safe. But as would-be assassins develop increasingly sophisticated methods, the president's protectors need to stay one step ahead. That's what scientists of Project STAR aimed for, and that's what Black File scientists continue to do today.